Hi there, and welcome to this episode of the Everyday Millionaire Mindset Matters podcast, where I'm joined by my wife, Olympic mental performance coach, Steffany Francie. In these episodes, Steffany and I have a conversation about the different aspects of what we refer to as Mindset Matters, because we believe that for those who are awake, we are living in and through the most impactful time in history. Your view of the world is the filter for how you will experience the evolution and changing dynamics of it. Our intention is to provide you with ideas, nutritious food for thought, and some tools that you can use to help you in being your greatest self and living your best life. Listen in, enjoy. So this is a parable of paradox, and many have heard this story, but I repeat it before we get into this conversation, which is that an old man was living on the frontier and he lost his horse one day, and his neighbors came over and goes, "Oh my gosh, that's so awful. You lost your horse." And the old man wisely said, "Well, what seems like a loss, it may be a blessing." A few months later, the horse returns, and guess what? It brought a bunch of friends, some really cool wild horses. And the neighbors came and they said, "Congratulations." The old man said, "Yeah, well, what seems like a blessing, sometimes those things can be like a curse." And later, the old man's son tried to ride one of those wild horses. He was thrown off that horse and he broke his leg. All the neighbors come rallying to his aid. Say, "Man, I'm so sorry. Gosh, your son's so hurt. Now what are you going to do? You're going to be behind the scene." The old man, in his wisdom, says, "What seems like a curse can sometimes be a blessing." Soon after that, a war broke out, and all the young men in the village were conscripted into the army. But the good fortune of the son was that he broke his leg, and so he couldn't be conscripted. And the old man said, "Well, what seems like good fortune may be a curse." So the parable is all about showing the paradox of what happens in life, and whether it's good, it's bad, fortune, misfortune, and our perceptions of what we can control or not control can blind us to the reality of what's going on. Welcome to Mindset Matters. How's that for an opening, Steffany?
That was amazing. Hi, hon.
So we're talking paradox. I thought, something, let's give it context right out of the gate. Share that old, parable. That story is quite a common one, but it does explain a lot, or I think it's a good illustration, a good story.
No, it really is. And I think what happens in many situations is that many people live in the absolutes. It's in the right and the wrong, in the either, the or. And when we commit to one side or the other, then we have to defend that side. Like, think about all the neighbors coming in cheering, when the horses arrive, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry your son broke his leg." And I'm cheering because he didn't have to go to war. So that roller coaster of emotions really locks in the power of the paradox. I call it the champion's paradox. And when you think of living in the absolutes of right and wrong, dark and light, love and war, the paradox, if you sit in that, really limits your ability to grow. What I invite my clients to do, and the athletes, is to rise above the paradox and understand that two things can exist at the same time. And if you're not attached to the one or the other, you actually have more power going forward.
And I guess in that same kind of thought process, when we live into an ideology of something, that can be that right or wrong is this way and no other way. And we sometimes, I think we're setting ourselves up. I don't know that I have many ideologies, probably do, but those are my blind spots, of course. But having said that, when we look at paradox, there was one example that was, I think we talked about it in the past, which is around trust. And we've often heard somebody say, "I don't know, I just don't trust myself." Yet in saying that, you're trusting that you're not trusting yourself. You're actually trusting that the self-talk you have of not trusting yourself is, in fact, that's the paradox. And we can talk about the pursuit of happiness, the paradox of pursuing happiness as opposed to being happy, because all we've got is right now. We don't even have a future. So how are you pursuing a future happiness when you only got this moment? Those are all paradoxal. And do you want to expand on that a little bit? Do you have another example that you want to give?
I do. And the truth is, if you're seeking anything, you're in the future. And the truth is that there is no future. So when we talk about paradoxes, we're talking about how do we handle both and like the light and the dark at the same time. You think about all the work we did over the years with Dr. John Martini, for example. We learned that everything has a balance to it. There can't be a one-sided magnet. Right? There has to be a positive and a negative charge on both things. But if we have to commit to one side or the other, and we think we have to then fight to the death for that one side, what happens is that we limit the possibilities. We limit that energy that allows us to see maybe both sides of a situation. You're really brilliant at that. You have that ability to see both sides or multiple angles to a situation,
It's both a blessing and a curse, isn't it?
which is a paradox.
That's the paradox. Oh my gosh. That one is so funny. It's one of those unique gifts I have that is not good sometimes. So, let's talk about a little bit about this whole thought process around paradox. And when you think about what we just talked about, because over the many episodes that we've done, we've said several times things like don't force the river. In other words, be in the flow and not try and force the river. The universe is unfolding and is there for you, not happening against you. Even the parable of that story where the farmer's horse ran away, it was years, if you caught that, it was years later before the horse returned with its friends of other great wild horses. So if we would have had an expectation of that and it didn't happen in the time frame that we thought it was, so we would then be setting ourselves up for the frustration and all the things that go with it. So I'm just going with the whole point of is, don't force the river, understanding that what we have is these moments in time. We've talked many times about the gap and the gain and the paradox around us continually seeking and looking into the gap, the things that we don't have, as opposed to appreciating and being happy and being grateful for what we have today, because ultimately that's all there is. Those are all, I think, paradoxal. The other one that I'll throw on the table before and then you can riff off it if you want, is the understanding. And certainly at this phase or these phases of our life, we start to understand is the more you learn and the more we've learned over the years, the less we actually know. And we've learned that we know very little when it comes to these things. I think that goes back. I think it's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where the more knowledge you have, something along that line, or the more knowledge you gain in the subject, the more you realize how much you have to learn. And certainly in the body of work that we've done over the years, whether it be in my world of real estate and analytics and research and education and coaching, or what you have done in your work, you start to realize the more you know, the less you know. Just, I don't know, that's kind of paradoxical.
That's the ultimate paradox. Is that think about it. When people are training, and I'll use figure skating as an example because I believe sport is a microcosm of life. And even if you don't like sport and you're listening to this podcast and you're like, I don't know what she's talking about, it's not about sport. It's about the lesson. So, for example, you're a figure skater and you want to learn a jump or something, you have to fall down 99 times in order to land that jump one time. Or in Wayne Gretzky's shot, he says you have to take a million shots to get one goal in, or there's a lot of examples. But the truth is, in order to win, you have to lose. In order to enjoy the journey, you have to have some adversity. So I think when we live on one side of that quantum, we don't understand that it's okay to fail. It's okay to drop the ball. It's okay. And in the softening of the understanding of, yes, set a goal. Yes, you want to be the best. And yes, you want to just set all these intentions. But the truth is, life and shit is going to happen. And I always say to the athletes, and some of them don't like this, something is always going to happen on the way to the Olympic Games. In 2022, COVID hit, right? So we're still training athletes, not even knowing that they were going to get to the 2022 Olympics in Beijing. So the paradox in that is, well, is living into the unknown and living into the uncertainty and still doing the work anyway. That's a paradox. Honestly, there's no way we're gonna know that we don't know the future,
No, we think we do.
right?
We hope for it. There's
Well, I think
another there's another pair. There's a couple more I want to give examples of, and then let's talk about even how we bring this and apply it. But there's the one that showed up for me as you were talking is the paradox of having choice. We want more choice, yet, and because we believe that gives us more freedom, right? So if somebody says, well, it's this or that, you're going, what? That's the only choice I have? Those are the only choices I have? Yeah, those are the only choices. So we want more choice. But the reality of it is we're in a world of so many choices that we can have a lot of angst and anxiety, wondering if we're making the right choice or should we have made another choice, or having too many choices and not knowing. So there's a paradox in the freedom of choice and then being given a lot of choices. And the paradox is you've got too many choices and you can't make up your mind, and it's hard to make a decision. And then you're wondering if you've made the right decision because there's all this kind of endless scope of options and choices that we have. And that can also shut us down. So those are all of the paradoxes. And then the other one, which I thought was we have talked about in the past, and we just came off that great weekend with the Recon, the Real Estate Investor Conference, and it was a great, amazing event and really reconnected with all people. It was a real high, but after every high, there's a low. And I certainly felt that last week, where it's just like, oh, like that was fun. Let's keep having fun. Let's keep doing stuff. So, anyways, those are also paradoxal, aren't they?
they really are. And you really, I'm happy you brought that up, because after a high, whether it's a great conference, an Olympic medal, a win, closing a deal, there is a low. And the low is what we try to push away. And the more we try to push away the low, the more we don't learn to balance things out. Because you think of the high, the low, the high, the low, it's like a roller coaster. And the truth is, in order to really, for me to feel satisfaction in life, is to embrace the paradox and understand my job is to even out the highs and the lows of my own life, help my clients even out the highs and the lows. So there's perspective in going, you know what, there's going to be a high, there's going to be a low, but there's going to be a result of the decision that I'm going to make. So the reason we don't make decisions sometimes is because we don't know what the answer is going to be. We don't know what the results. Well, you know what? We're not going to know until we decide. And that's a paradox. If you don't decide, you won't get a result. And remember, the word decide means to cut away. And when you cut away, by making a decision in the direction you want to go, you're going to get a feedback, you're going to get a result. Then you can quickly change that, or you can be a victim to it and go, oh my God, I made the wrong decision. And ultimately, there is no wrong decision. There's just a result. But our ego gets in the way and goes, that was the wrong decision. So then we beat ourselves up. But when you think about it, if we just understand that the whole goal in life is to look at all sides, is to see what we want to see, don't get caught in our biases. And I'd really like one day to do a podcast on biases and really dig into what that is. But right now, when we talk about paradoxes, it's when we live in the absolutes. It has to be this way. In order for me to win, I have to do this, 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 and this. But the truth is, that isn't the way that it is. There's going to be action, decisions, result, correction. And that takes the mindset, what I call the mindset of a champion, and the champion's paradox. Many people can't hold two opposing thoughts in their mind at the same time. It's too exploding, it's too confusing, because they want certainty. The understanding of a champion's paradox is that you have to be okay with uncertainty.
That's the paradox. So where do we go in terms of, I don't always. So my thought process is that we come back to gratitude. We come back to being in the moment. The champion's journey is always one of being a best version of ourselves, knowing that that's an everyday thing. Every day there is a shift, a change that can be made, something that says, okay, and that something could be just, okay, I'm going to look at the world through a different set of eyes. Today, I'm going to be really making sure that I'm managing my negative self-talk, or I'm being grateful for what I have, or I'm honoring the relationships that I have. I was recently reading, and there was the common conversation about the many centurions that have been interviewed, and none of them, or those on their deathbed, and none of them have said, I wish I would have worked more. None of them would have said, I wish I would have bought more boats or more cars or had a bigger house. None of that ever happens. When you're talking to those centurions and when you're talking to those that are on their deathbed, what they honor is the relationships that they built and that they have in their life. That was really ultimately where their wealth was, but it takes people to that point in their life where they realize, and I don't want to be that person. I want to appreciate all that I have today. And that, in fact, is, I think that takes a real concentrated effort and focus and being present in the moment. And I don't know where the paradox is in that. I guess the paradox in that is that we're often future thinking and not appreciating what we have today because it's never quite enough. I find myself in that space. And I think that's part of being that A-type personality, wanting to accomplish more, be more, do more. But at some point, we have to stay grounded in what we have is fantastic, it's beautiful, and be grateful for all of the things that we do have in our life. I was reminded of that in the quote that, again, all of these things we've heard before, which was the man complained he had no shoes until he met a man who had no feet. And this is such a great reminder. And I want to share the story one more time of our friend Aaron, who is a quadriplegic, young man, quadriplegic. You and I have known him for many years. We've watched his journey from before when he was walking and was a great hockey player, had an accident, goes into the boards, breaks his neck, quadriplegic. You used to use him as an example when the kids complained on the ice. I mean, gosh, they're out there having fun and you're doing skating with them and power skating, and they're complaining because this is hard work. Power skating is so hard. And you used to get annoyed with them and go, no, power skating is not hard. Being a quadriplegic, that's freaking hard. And then we're over at Aaron's one time having dinner, and I said to Aaron, I said, just so you know, Steffany and I both, we use you a little bit as inspiration time sometimes for kids when they complain. When they're complaining about something, we go, no, that's not hard. Being a quadriplegic is hard. And he laughed and he said, no, being a quadriplegic isn't hard. Being a quadriplegic on a ventilator, that's fucking hard. And, right there, perspective and an understanding of the paradox of being and appreciating what you have regardless of what it is.
Oh, that story brings me back so much. I mean, that the Moser family was so influential in our life, with Aaron and Kyle and Peter and Darlene, like such an important family. And what I realized is that on so many levels, that what it taught me and bringing forward, on my Olympic journey is that the question I ask the athletes is that, are you a champion because you win medals? Or do you win medals because you're a champion? Right. And Aaron taught me that is that, he took his hockey as far as he could. It was an unfortunate accident. And he has taken his life as a quadriplegic to another level that he shouldn't, in many levels, have turned 40. And he was 18 when that accident happened. But because of his mindset and the commitment of his family, he's able to turn that around. So thank you for bringing that up. It just brings me right back to my heart. And I know that that is one of the things that has driven me to continue to work with athletes in the realm of using sport. And this is the thing, is we use sport to learn the lessons of what it takes to be an amazing human being, because sport is a microcosm. And this is another paradox. It's a microcosm of what's going on. There's politics, there's bullshit, there's management, there's ego, there's all the things that happen in life, but it's a microcosm. So with me, I take it to the athletes, and going back to the question is, when I'm working with people that want to be Olympic champions, world champions, I go, okay, well, you can work harder, or you can figure out what the qualities that are needed to become a champion, so that the medal is just a reflection of who you're being. Because so many people put the medal or the champion ahead of that, and then they lose the whole journey. And then the life after is like starting from scratch. So the paradox in that is, how do you choose to show up? How do you want people to see you? What do you want to be known for before you retire, before the medal, so that who you're becoming, the medal just becomes something that is attracted to you? And that's what I've really proven over the last several years is that who are you being? Are you a champion because you received a medal? Or did you get the medal because you were on the journey of being a champion? And that's what I've been able to see in the paradox and what I've proven over the last many years.
So how do we take, some of this conversation and, what's our suggestions for applying what we're talking about here today? When you think about paradox, we live in constant paradox, I think, often, if we really think about it. But how do we stay grounded and actually use the conversation around paradox in a way that, supports us getting through our day, our month, our careers, our businesses, whatever that might be? What's your thoughts on that?
I think that's a great question. I think the first thing is to understand that there are two sides to everything. There is no one-sided magnet. There's you flip a coin, there's two sides. If you don't have that moment going, I need to look at the other side. I need to see the paradoxical side of the decision. I can hold two opposing thoughts. And I think that's what's happened right now is the polarity and the divisiveness of what's going on since the last, well, it's been going on forever, but for sure the last since 2020 is that people have been forced to decide they have to stick on one side and that they don't have the ability, I believe, as humans and as people and a society and leaders, that we need to be able to hold both sides, and we need to have in our leadership to say, okay, you have this opinion, I have this opinion, they have this opinion, what is going on? Let's support each other in having those multi-layered paradoxical opinions, because that's what's going to move us forward. I'm doing the opposite of what's being told, this divisiveness and this polarity. Polarity is what's going to pull us apart as humanity, as society, as businesses, and as leaders. So for me, embracing and introducing the concept of the champion's paradox is that it'll give leaders and people that are in our world the option to go, so you have a different opinion than me? That's so cool. Well, here's what I think. Interesting. Here's what I think. Interesting. We don't have to have a judgment or get so defensive in the polarity. That is what's going to pull us apart, I believe, as a community and as a society. So I don't want to get any deeper than that, but ultimately understanding that two completely opposing thoughts can exist at the same time, the champion's paradox, is what's going to move us forward into changing and redirecting a lot of this divisiveness.
I think there's, when you think about this, goes back to the paradox of thinking we can control certain things. So nothing pushes my buttons more, and I'm very vocal about it often, around bureaucracy. Drives me absolutely crazy. Bureaucracy begets bureaucracy, and it's a real button for me. And that all boils down to whether, I don't care what it is. Bureaucracy in any capacity to me is just such a waste of time most of the time. That's my view of the world. And somebody would debate that and say, well, it's all very necessary. But I'm primarily focused on government and all of that.
And efficiencies.
And
It's
efficiency. And the lack thereof. We create bureaucracy to be efficient. And then the next thing you know, we need more of it to be more efficient. And none of it ever gets efficient. And it shuts things down. And as a capitalist and a libertarian and somebody who just wants to get shit done, it drives me absolutely crazy. Having said all that, the reality of it is that there's a part of it where, and that's the paradox, what can I control and what can't I control? I can't control any of that. At some point, I'll vote. That will hopefully have a meaningful impact. But ultimately, my frustration lives in they don't live a set of values of efficiency that I believe are, in fact, efficiency. I can't control that. All I can control is my reaction to it. And so I remember to breathe. I remember to work out. I remember to let it go. And then just trust that at some point there'll be some flow that I can tap into. There's no way to force the river. Any of me stating my opinion is just letting off steam. And at some point, maybe it makes me feel somewhat better. I don't think so. Ultimately, there's nothing I can do about it. So I have to step back from it and go, it is what it is. And that's the way it is. How do I live my life within the parameters of those things that I can't control? How do I let go of the things I can't control and just focus on what I can control? And that is how I feel about things, how I look at things, how I shift things. That's it. Walking around angry, pissed off, doesn't serve anybody around me. It doesn't serve me, and it doesn't change the circumstances. So as much as I may have a platform called the podcast event a little bit, or the real estate investment network, and it's, mostly tongue in cheek, but ultimately there's nothing that's going to change anything. And we still have to create and build our lives around what is. So I don't know what that rant is all about, but that's just kind of where I'm at.
Well, I call it the power of the what isness. We have to deal with what is. The truth of what is that both sides happen, the positive and the negative happen. And in order to elevate our consciousness, in order to elevate the decision-making process that we have, is that the minute we lock into one side or the other, then we are living into the polarity. So to your point, yes, we need to have a place to clear. I call it clearing because I don't like the whole venting kind of thing, because that like sucks our negative energy and locks us into the negative mindset. But when we have the opportunity to clear with somebody who's not going to have an opinion, clearing to me means, how do we get all of our angst and our anxiety and our fears out in a safe place? I journal. I journal a lot. I only talk to trusted people when I'm feeling negative, but it allows me to come back to center. And that's the thing, is we come back to center and we come back to neutral. We exist in both sides, but we act from a place of neutrality. And the decisions when you can get to neutral are not emotion based. They're not drama based. They're not anger based. They're not vindictive. And I think the goal to get to neutral, and one day we'll talk about the energy chart with Hawkins, is that when we get to neutral and we can see both sides, then we have better perspective. Similar, circling back to the story in the parable about the man and the horse. He didn't have a judgment that the horse ran away. He just went, let's see what happens. Then the horse came back with all the other wild horses. That's not good or bad. So when we label something good or bad, that's when we don't understand the paradox of being a champion.
Yeah, it's interesting right now, if we just even riff off that story a little bit, given what's happening in the world. I mean, right now, as we're recording this, we're possibly inches away from a world war. Some would argue that it's already started, given what's happening in the Middle East, Lebanon, Russia, Ukraine, all of the things that are happening in the world. Dock strikes are ramping up. So the world is really feeling at times like it's coming unglued. We have no control over that. All we can have control over is the decisions that we make in terms of how we will risk mitigate, if that's what you're going to do, how you might want to react to it, given that it seems to be unfolding. If you see it that way, some are not aware of any of it. Many people are just disconnected from it all and worried more about what's happening and even what the struggles are that they're having. Maybe putting food on the table, maybe keeping a job, maybe keeping a business moving forward. But the reality of it is that we still have to make that decision. So the paradox in all of that is we can't control, but we can be present to what is happening and then do what we need to do based on how we view the world today. Does that make sense?
And we will be tested.
Oh, yes.
Every time. I mean, hun, when you think about it, you make some really good points, is that we are on the verge, from what I understand, of World War III. We don't know what's going to happen. We can't control that. What we can, think about what we can control. We can control how we are, how we love each other, how we take care of each other, how we create spaces for people to show up in our life, how we make sure that we are honoring our, our values and the people that trust us. So for me, I go more internal. The less I can feel I can control externally, another paradox, the more I go, what What can I control internally? Who can I take care of? What can I do? How can I prepare? How do I make sure that our world is still going to be grounded in it, and regardless of what's happening on the outside? And you make a really good point, because we don't know. And the fact that people think they do know, it's bullshit. None of us know the future. And that is another paradox, is that yes, we're planning for the future, but we're preparing in the moment. We can't do anything about the past, and we can't do anything about the external. But we can do is take care of what we're doing right now. And I think that's another paradox.
And on that note, we'll leave it. So, what's the paradox happening in your life? How do you see paradox? Steffany, thanks for this conversation.
That was fun.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. If you found value in the podcast, please take the time to rate and review and share with others. Share with your friends. As it is my goal to always improve and to provide the highest value for you, the listener. If you have any comments, suggestions, or questions you'd like answered, please email me at ceo@reincanada.com. That's ceo@reincanada.com. I look forward to hearing from you. And until next time, Patrick out.